Welcome back to the Survival Historian, where the grit of human endurance meets the depth of our forgotten past. I'm your host, and today we're stepping into a world that challenges everything modern comfort has taught us to expect. So imagine a fortress of stone rising from frozen earth, its walls thick enough to withstand siege engines, its halls vast enough to echo with the footsteps of kings. Now, picture surviving winter there, with nothing but fire, stone, and ingenuity. No thermostats, no furnaces, no electric blankets, just the raw intelligence of medieval engineers who understood something we've nearly forgotten, that survival isn't about fighting nature, it's about working with it. Today, we're unearthing the climate control secrets of medieval castles, and what we discover might just change how you think about warmth, architecture, and resilience itself. For generations, we've imagined medieval castle life as a frozen misery, with nobles huddled in furs around pathetic fires, their breath visible in candle-lit chambers. This image, romantic as it may be, is largely fiction. The reality was far more sophisticated. Medieval castle dwellers weren't ignorant of comfort, nor were they simply tougher than modern humans. They were engineers of their environment, masters of a thermal science we've largely abandoned in favor of brute force heating systems that consume massive energy. The challenge they faced was genuinely daunting. How do you heat a structure whose walls might be 20 feet thick, whose ceilings soar 30 feet high, whose very material, limestone, granite, sandstone, conducts heat away from living spaces with ruthless efficiency? Stone, after all, is an excellent thermal conductor. Touch a castle wall in winter and it feels like touching ice itself. The answer wasn't to fight the stone's nature, but to transform it from enemy to ally, to turn those massive walls into something unprecedented heat batteries that could store warmth for days. The evolution of castle heating reads like a technological arms race against winter itself. Early Norman castles used central hearths, open fires placed in the middle of great halls, with smoke simply rising through roof vents. This primitive system was smoky, inefficient, and dangerous. But by the 13th and 14th centuries, castle engineers had developed something revolutionary: the wall-mounted fireplace with integrated flue systems. These weren't random installations. Every fireplace was positioned with geometric precision, creating a network of heat sources that maximized thermal distribution throughout the living quarters. The flues themselves were architectural marvels, often running through the thickness of walls in serpentine patterns that extracted every possible calorie from rising smoke. As hot air traveled upward through these channels, it warmed the surrounding stone, which then radiated that heat into adjacent chambers. Some castles featured flues that passed behind the walls of multiple rooms, effectively creating a primitive central heating system where one fire could serve several spaces. The Great Hall's massive fireplace deserves special attention. These weren't mere fireplaces but thermal engines, some wide enough to walk into, burning logs the size of small trees. The secret to their efficiency lay in their design: deeply recessed fireboxes that maximized radiant heat projection, angled backs that reflected warmth into the room, and carefully calculated flue dimensions that created strong drafts, pulling fresh air through the space while expelling smoke efficiently. A well-designed great hall fire could maintain comfortable temperatures for hundreds of people simultaneously, transforming what might have been an impossibly cold space into the warm heart of castle life. But fire was only part of the equation. The true genius of medieval thermal management lay in passive systems that required no fuel, no maintenance, no intervention beyond intelligent design. Consider the tapestry, that quintessential symbol of medieval wealth. We see them today as art, but to castle inhabitants they were survival equipment. A heavy woolen tapestry hanging against a stone wall created an air gap, a dead space, where still air acted as insulation, preventing the wall from stealing heat from the room. Multiple tapestries could raise a chamber's temperature by several degrees without burning an extra log. These textiles also blocked the microscopic gaps in mortared stone, where draft could infiltrate, creating a relatively sealed envelope within the larger drafty structure. The architecture itself was a passive heating system. Those famously thick walls weren't just defensive, they were thermal mass on a scale we rarely build today. During the day, fires and even weak winter sunlight would heat the stone. That heat would penetrate slowly inward, taking hours to fully absorb. Then, as night fell and fires died down, the process reversed. The stone released its stored warmth gradually, acting as a massive, slow-releasing radiator that kept interior temperatures stable through the coldest hours. Window design reveals similar sophistication. Small windows weren't merely defensive features, they were calculated thermal decisions. Less glass meant less heat loss, but placement mattered enormously. South-facing walls often featured larger windows to capture solar gain, while north walls remained nearly blind. Those windows that existed were often covered not with expensive glass, but with oiled linen or scraped horn, translucent materials that admitted light while providing surprising insulation. The internal layout of rooms wasn't accidental either. Private chambers were typically smaller than we'd build today, deliberately so because smaller volumes require less energy to heat. Sleeping chambers often clustered together in the warmest sections of the castle, sharing walls and thereby sharing heat. Medieval castle inhabitants didn't try to maintain uniform temperatures throughout their fortress year-round. Instead, they practiced zone heating with remarkable discipline. During deep winter, vast sections of castles were simply abandoned, their doors closed, their spaces surrendered to the cold. The household consolidated into a smaller thermal core, often centered around the Great Hall and immediately adjacent private chambers. This wasn't hardship, it was intelligent resource management. Why burn precious fuel heating empty guest quarters when everyone could live comfortably in one-third the space? The human element itself contributed significantly to thermal management. A great hall filled with 100 bodies became noticeably warmer from body heat alone, with each person contributing roughly the thermal output of a 75-watt light bulb. Castle inhabitants understood this instinctively, gathering for meals, entertainment and work in shared spaces where collective warmth supplemented fireplace heat. Even livestock played a role. Ground-floor storage rooms and stables weren't just convenient. The heat rising from animal bodies below contributed to warming the inhabited floors above. At night, the famous four-poster bed became a survival tool. Those heavy curtains weren't decorative flourishes, but essential insulation, creating a micro-environment where body heat accumulated, where breath warmed the enclosed air, where a person could sleep comfortably even as the larger chamber dropped toward freezing. As we face climate change and energy crises, the thermal wisdom of medieval castles speaks across centuries with surprising relevance. These structures achieved livable comfort using only passive solar gain, thermal mass, strategic insulation, and localized heating, precisely the principles that cutting-edge sustainable architecture is rediscovering today. Modern super-insulated homes with thermal mass floors, strategic window placement, and zone heating are, in essence, echoing solutions perfected by 13th-century stonemasons. The medieval approach teaches resilience through adaptation rather than domination. Castle inhabitants didn't demand that every room reach 72 degrees year-round. They adapted their lives to their environment, wearing appropriate clothing, consolidating into warmer zones during extreme weather, and accepting seasonal variation as natural. This flexibility, this willingness to work with rather than against natural thermal rhythms, might be the most valuable lesson of all. In an era when power grids strain and energy costs soar, the low-tech, low-energy solutions of the past deserve serious reconsideration. The next time you adjust your thermostat, consider the medieval engineer who achieved comfort through thickness of stone and careful positioning of fire, who understood that true climate control isn't about forcing nature into submission, but about creating spaces where human needs and natural processes align. That's the survival wisdom that built castles to last centuries, and it's wisdom we're only beginning to appreciate again. If this journey into forgotten engineering fascinated you, hit that like button and subscribe to The Survival Historian. We'll continue exploring how history's survivors faced impossible challenges with nothing but ingenuity and determination, uncovering lessons that might just help us navigate our own uncertain future. Until next time, stay curious, stay resilient, and remember, the answers we need might already exist, waiting in the stones of the past.